always believed in traditional family. Man and woman marry. They remain committed for a lifetime. But every day in the media, I seem to be told that I've got it wrong. So I have to ask the question, does culture have it right? Or is there something better? Is there a way to do family that really works? Join me on a journey of discovery as we literally search the world for answers. What creates a good society? What sustains us and enables us to thrive in our world? Where would be a good place to start? Why did God use marriage as the first relationship between humans? You know, that's something I ask myself a lot as I traveled the world.
You know, again, I think so often we try to overcomplicate it, but I think the Lord in His simplicity has shown us just how beautiful His design is, and that His attributes are seen in relationship, in our marriage relationship. And I think we struggle at times to think that God relates to us the way we would our own children. Why would that be so? Why would we be made in His image and then have different attributes? I think those attributes are right there in front of us. We talk about an unyielding, unconditional love for our children. So often they could do very little that's going to strain us to the point of rejecting them. Isn't that wonderful to think of our Heavenly Father in that same way? Lord, what could we do that could separate us from your love? He says nothing. And I think that it reflects so beautifully, the family reflects so beautifully God's care for us and His love for us.
I'm at the church where it's believed that Jesus turned water to wine in Cana, His first miracle. If God really is the author of marriage and family, and if He really did write it into our story from the very beginning, then it stands to reason that we are hardwired to crave relationship. If He really did design us to be a reflection of His image through this amazing relationship, then it makes sense that we'd see the positive effects of marriage and family in every culture and in every society.
God doesn't set up a government office for the future governance of the Garden of Eden be the origins of a family. That's the first divine concern. It seems to be the root out of which everything else in human society needs to grow organically.
Literally, from the womb to the tomb, family or a sense of belonging or connectedness really sustains us. You know, it's interesting. The brain runs on three things. It runs on oxygen, so it's good to breathe, glucose, so you make sure you feed people, but it also runs on relationship. You know, if you take babies and feed and water them, they will fail to thrive physically. Even beyond that, parts of their brains won't even develop. We can take brain scans of infants who weren't loved, even though their physical needs were taken care of, weren't loved later on. They're literal black spots in the brain where there should be hardwiring.
Family is the force that defines society. So that microcosm of experience can then expand, and we can look at society as a whole, and we can say, look, society should not mold the family. Family should mold the society.
If we think that family and marriage only are about the couple, the children, the extended family, then we fail to understand the power of what family does. Family serves a public purpose.
The state does not precede the family and cannot define what it is, but rather on the contrary, the family is the natural fundamental element of civilization, and the state depends upon the family and is grounded in healthy family life. So if you disinvest from the healthy support of family life, it actually undercuts the good of the state. It's very dangerous for a state to try to disinvest from the moral climate of the family, because what you're going to end up doing is harming the very common good on which the state is built.
Jesus told a parable about if you're going to build something, you've got to plan the groundwork for it. You've got to make sure it's got a solid foundation. Society is built on family. It's a building block. It's a foundational building block of what creates a good society. And if we don't put the energy that we need into healthy, strong, loving, productive families, society's in trouble. Your society is just no better than your family structures.
Marriage and family become, in a sense, the basis then for all of the rest of the social institutions.
Families catechize the next generation to live in the society that they're in. And when it doesn't happen in a family, where is it going to happen? It's certainly not going to happen out of Hollywood. It's certainly not going to happen out of government programs, right? Which, aren't precise enough to get the job done. It's only going to happen out of the family. And that's why societies with a stable family structure are the ones that are the most stable as a society.
I couldn't help but see how special marriage is across all cultures, from weddings I went to couples I spoke with. Yet the contrast was phenomenal, when many would say that marriage is passé, no longer relevant. In your opinion, what is the state of the family today?
That question is problematic for me because there is no the family. Families are very diverse and they come in all shapes and sizes. Each one is unique, and we think they all deserve equal respect and rights.
Talking about all shapes and sizes of a family, can you paint the picture for me of what the modern family looks like?
A modern family is a group of people who, it's sort of the same message, a group of people who love and support and are committed to each other. And it's not particularly modern. It's always been that way.
When we think of modern family, perhaps there's nothing more reflective of the culture than the hit TV show itself. Describe the postmodern family to me.
Things are whatever I say they are. It's love because I say that it is. It's family because I say that it is. I'm the gender that I say that I am. There's no givenness to things. And the idea is that anything that I call a family is a family. Any gathering of people, if I say that it is, it is. As if, and this is the key point, as if there's no givenness to the world.
How is that different to the biblical or the theistic view of family?
The fundamental assumption of postmodernism is that there is no truth out there. The truth is only what I impose on the world. There's no truth that comes from the outside. The fundamental truth of Christianity is in the beginning God. C.S. Lewis said it was the most powerful philosophical statement of all time, because if that's true, the entire world's different. If there is a God. If there is a God, then everything has a design, a purpose, a givenness to it, and it can't just be refabricated according to our whims and desires. Or if it is, it's actually going to go against its design. And that's negative, right? I mean, we know if something's designed to be a laptop and we use it as a Frisbee, it doesn't work out so well, right? Same thing if the world's given. If there's a design to gender, if there's a design to sex, if there's a design to freedom, if there's a design to government, if there's a design to family, and we live against that design in the name of our own autonomy, there's going to be bad consequences.
I want to be realistic here, though. I mean, I've got gay friends. I know people that are in New Zealand where they're civil unioned or together, and they seem really happy. In fact, they're great couples. It's almost unfair for me to turn around and say, what you're doing, mate, it's just downright wrong. And there is some talk that says, if that's what they want to do, let them do it, and let us be the example in the church of what's right. Is that not an okay space to live in?
That is challenging. I'm in the same place you are with very close friends that are in this lifestyle or that lifestyle. And whether we're talking about cohabitation or whether we're talking about same-sex relationships or whatever, and they seem happy. But happiness is not the measure of good. And that's one of the deep lies of our culture, is that if you're happy, it must be good.
People do often make a distinction between happiness and joy. And I think there's a legitimate distinction there, depending on how you use the terms. Happiness in our culture has a whole lot to do with what somebody gives me. Whether my life goes well, whether I have the right car, the right income, the right wife, the right kids, the right husband, the right whatever. And there is a certain good feeling that comes from having those things. And I wouldn't knock that for a minute. I kind of like my blessings. I kind of like having a good-looking wife who's a good lady. There's nothing's wrong with feeling the happiness of that. But suppose those are taken from me. What's left? Is there anything in the middle of suffering that can be called joy? And I believe that joy is available to anybody at any time, in any circumstance, and any condition of soul, if you define joy not as dependent on what you get from another, but what you give to another that God has given you. The commitment to the well-being of another at any cost to yourself. When you relate like that, you'll know what the word joy means.
But this idea that the right thing to do will always make you happy is patently absurd. Because the thing that will most likely make you happy is do the most selfish thing you can right now.
As Christians, we sometimes have a hard time figuring out, what drives our secular culture? Where are these attacks on marriage coming from? Why do people want to redefine marriage? And we have to realize this is totally consistent with a secular worldview. When you recognize that, at least you're not taken aback. At least you have tools to analyze it. For the secular person, marriage is not intrinsic to our nature. Marriage is something that it's a social arrangement that evolved at a certain time because it had some adaptive value in the evolution of the human race. But it's not inherent in human nature, and therefore we can change it when we want to.
My greatest concern regarding family, I think, would be that family is no longer looked at as a sort of solid block, that it's just sort of this amorphous thing. First of all, that marriage, and even in the Christian community, this is increasingly an attitude that people are taking is temporary or dissoluble. I think that we need to, and you see this with these shows like Modern Family, there's just this real sinister effort to tear apart what we've understood family to be for millennia.
Therefore, marriage is purely a human construct that has no root in things. And if that's true, then we can do with it what we please. And the Supreme Court recently did with it what it pleased.
In the Declaration of Independence, we affirm that rights come from the Creator, that we're endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights. And the whole point of that is that they have to come from the Creator or they're not inalienable. If the government creates them, the government can take them away. And it's the same with our view of marriage and the family. They are pre-state, pre-government realities because they're defined by God. If the government defines marriage and family, then the government can redefine it. But if the government doesn't create family, then it is not right for the government to try to redefine it.
In a biblical understanding, the state doesn't create marriage, the church doesn't create marriage, individual couples don't create marriage. Marriage is something that God creates, and we either work with the grain of the universe there, or we walk away from it. But it's of fundamental importance to God.
We can see how important it is to have family in creating a stable society. But just how vital is it to have marriage at the center?
I do think marriage is good for the community. I don't think that everyone has to be married, though, to have a healthy community.
I guess it just brings a bit more structure to a lot of people's lives, and I think a lot of people need that.
Marriage creates a stable unit for people to live together, have a small community, socialize, raise kids.
I think some people will always be able to survive not having a family. But I think that growing up in a home that supports you and loves you and meets your needs certainly helps you become a more productive person. But I don't think not having that means you're doomed to fail.
The trajectory when it comes to marriage is not good. We're seeing a retreat from marriage.
We know that fewer people are getting married. more people are getting divorced, more children are being born out of wedlock and raised in single-parent homes.
If one is questioning whether or not family is necessary, it's very similar to questioning whether civilization is necessary. No, it's not. People can live without civilization, but it's a lot better to be civilized. Barbarism is no fun, and life without family, society without family, is barbaric. It's that simple.
Several years ago, I, along with a group of other scholars, did some research on this, looking at the consequences of marriage. And we found that when couples are married, they do better economically. And so they earn more, they're less likely to live in poverty, they're less likely to have economic hardship.
The more marriages we have in our community, the lower crime is going to be, less domestic violence, higher income, higher employment rate, better education. I mean, all those things that enhance human well-being and strengthen the community. Marriage does provide and enhance all of those things like no other social institution does.
The outcomes for people who cohabitate instead of getting married, much worse. Economic outcomes, health outcomes, social outcomes. The outcomes for children who result from cohabitation and children who are raised by a single parent, much worse than children who have married parents. And so just objectively, not as a matter of moralizing, but objectively, the outcomes are all worse for both parents and kids because of this.
We're now seeing a society in which marriage is under threat, and children, as a result, are increasingly born without the protection that they need in order to develop properly as responsible human beings.
Even the most aggressively secularist people, even the new atheists, would not dispute that society benefits from having coherent, intact families at its center. And the reason is that when families are not coherent and intact, you see a rise in all kinds of problems for kids.
William Good, a really celebrated sociologist, one of the big guys in the room in the pantheon of good sociologists, he talked about what family does and why it's essential. He says, family is an instrument or agent of the larger society. Its failure to perform adequately means that the goals of the larger society may not be achieved.
The distinction between Plato and Aristotle is very important because this goes to the very root of our civilization. Aristotle took the view that the family is fundamental to all forms of social order. It's the place in which children come into being, the place where they're nurtured and receive their primary instruction, and it's also a place where people belong and build up a sphere of sovereignty of the individual, and also ownership of goods and an ability to act freely and as responsible citizens in the world around them. So he thought the family was absolutely fundamental to political order. Plato, on the contrary, believed that it's the state that comes first. The family is, insofar as it exists, a threat to the state because it's creating spheres of sovereignty that are outside state control. And so he believed that families should be abolished, children should be regarded as the property of the state, brought up collectively in battery farms like chickens, and the women held in common among all the men. And that was obviously the first major example in philosophical thinking of this kind of abstract utopian vision.
Well, Plato wanted to take children away and raise them as a state orphanage, which many other utopians since have also agreed. They didn't trust individual parents, and they wanted the state to step in and raise the children.
Some in the media argue for a redefinition, as seen in this recent ad on cable television.
We have
never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
Utopian communities that try to redefine the family always wind up in dystopian horror stories. Other communities have said we're going to have free love in which there is no attachment of one couple to one another, but everyone's involved sexually with everyone else, and everyone's children belongs to everyone. Those scenarios also end up in disaster because you have jealousies and all sorts of fights that break out. Why? Because human nature is not that malleable.
Is this all of the community here?
This is all of the community of the original community, but also the descendants of the original community.
To discover a real-life story of a utopian experiment, I decided to visit the Oneida Colony in upstate New York. Founded in 1848, they called their movement perfectionism. Here they tried to create the Garden of Eden, right here on Earth.
It was started by John Humphrey Noyes. So in 1848, they came from Putney, Vermont, with about 80 members and founded the Oneida community. It was done as a Bible communist, perfectionist community. They believed that because the kingdom of God was here and now, this was heaven on earth. And according to the Bible, in heaven one is neither given nor taken in marriage. And therefore, they believed that there was a selfishness associated with monogamous marriage, that people could love everybody, man and woman, parent and children. These people were against what they called special love. Special love was a kind of selfishness. It could be a special love of a man for a woman for a man, a parent for a child, or a person for a thing. It showed a kind of special attachment that took you away from the larger community and the well-being of the larger community. So they created a form of kind of free love, so that if you were already married, you renounced that relationship.
So what was the undoing of John Humphrey Noyes' utopian community?
Certain conflicts over or questionings of complex marriage was one of the factors. The environment around the community changed over time. And for all of those reasons, the very notion, the very idea, the very possibility of a utopia, of a perfect society seemed to have less resonance.
If you flip the channels these days, there seems to be something for everyone. People in search of creating their own ideas about family, like this show about polyamory.
Meet Anthony. He married Lindsay, and soon they brought in Vanessa.
I'm in love with Anthony and Lindsay. I'm their girlfriend.
This is Kamala and her husband Michael. They're excited to ask their lovers, Tall and Jennifer, to live with them.
It's so rare to have 4 people that love each other as deeply as we do.
They'll be sharing much more than their beds. When Showtime presents its newest documentary reality series, Polyamory, Married and Dating.
Monogamy destroys families.
Those experiments of the utopian community, they have all failed, and failed miserably, because they don't correspond with what God wrote in the human heart and in our DNA. And every one of those communities have reverted back to the original idea. One man, one woman, raising their common children together in marriage.
Marriage is unique. It's the one relationship that's ordered to bring forth life. We can see that it brings order to our families, to our daily lives. In fact, research shows us that society benefits spiritually, economically and socially, when marriage is intact. But who keeps it all running like clockwork?
Mother's love for her child is probably the most powerful love that one human being has for another. There's something about that love.
There's just no way to overestimate how important mothers are to our society and our families.
Jesus had a mom, and Jesus loved a mom like any good boy loves his mother.
Join us next time as we explore the essential role of mothers. I'm Tim Cicerich, and you're part of the Family Project.
To dig deeper, visit familyproject.com.